My middle son, a senior in college, recently hit me with a request for spring break money. It caught me off guard, not because I don't want him to enjoy himself. He's a good kid mostly, but the timing and the casualness of it rubbed me raw. His mother's been battling some serious mental health issues lately, and having him around would have meant the world to her. Yet here he was, seemingly more focused on getting hammered on a beach in Hawaii with his fraternity brothers. I can't even fault him, honestly. I was the same way at his age, a carbon copy of his youthful impulsiveness and desire for escape. I see so much of myself in him that it's almost unsettling. The whole interaction, in fact, dragged me back to my own college days, stirring up a memory I hadn't touched in decades. It's a story I'm about to tell, and ironically, it was my son who introduced me to this platform, so perhaps he'll get a kick out of it if it ever sees the light of day. I was Wharton, class of '85. A fact I still wear like a badge of honor. It was, and remains, the pinnacle of business education, and I took that reputation seriously. I worked hard, harder than most, even amidst the wild, almost debaucherous atmosphere that permeated the campus. Some of my classmates were truly unhinged, like characters ripped straight from The Wolf of Wall Street. I tried my best to steer clear of that particular current, to maintain some semblance of focus on my future. But junior year, I stumbled into something a little impulsive, a decision that, looking back, might have set a different course for my entire life. I was dating Maria Munoz, a vibrant Puerto Rican girl whose memory still surfaces fondly in my thoughts sometimes. I often wonder how different my life would be if I had pursued things further with some of the women I dated back then, Maria being prominent among them. Instead of heading home for spring break, as was my usual custom, Maria convinced me to come to Puerto Rico to meet her extended family. It was my first time on the island, and I was eager to impress. I agreed without a second thought, despite a growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. I was a nervous wreck, truly. Maria often joked about how open and interconnected Puerto Rican families were, and I knew without a doubt that they had already heard a great deal about me. The idea of facing that collective scrutiny, of being judged and assessed by an entire lineage, was daunting. I meticulously rehearsed polite greetings and imagined worst-case scenarios, my mind spinning with potential faux pas. Would I say the wrong thing? Would I offend someone inadvertently? The tropical humidity already seemed to cling to me, a physical manifestation of my burgeoning apprehension. Every interaction felt like a performance, each smile a deliberate act, and I found myself scrutinizing Maria's family for any subtle signs of disapproval. The weight of their collective gaze felt heavy, despite their genuine warmth. As it turned out, my anxiety was mostly unfounded. I clicked with everyone immediately, a surprising ease settling over me as we shared meals and stories. They were boisterous, welcoming, and genuinely interested in my life. It felt as if I had been absorbed into their chaotic, loving orbit, and I was relieved. Most of the trip revolved around meeting a seemingly endless stream of relatives, each more charming than the last, but Maria and I did carve out time for our own adventures. It was spring break after all. One of those outings was a hike through El Yunque, a place I remember vividly. Fun fact, it's the only tropical rainforest in the U.S. National Forest System. Neither of us had a car, obviously, so Maria's mother dropped us off at one of the most popular trailheads. Maria and I were both pretty devious back then, always looking for an angle, so we definitely took advantage of the fact that we didn't have to drive. The plan was simple: hike, soak in the breathtaking scenery, and sneak in a little rum and weed. Everything was lining up perfectly for an idyllic day, a quintessential spring break memory in the making. But then we hit a snag. A big one. The trail we were most excited about, the one Maria had been hyping up for weeks, was closed. I don't remember the exact reason. Flooding, maintenance, something innocuous like that. But all I recall is the immediate slump in Maria's shoulders, the almost visible deflation of her excitement. I tried to soothe her, suggesting we simply pick another of the many other trails the forest offered. But she wasn't having it. "This is the trail," she insisted, her voice tight with disappointment. "The others don't even come close." I couldn't wrap my head around how one hiking trail could be astronomically superior to another, but Maria was adamant. And I had long since learned the dangers of arguing with her over something she felt so passionately about. So I asked her what she wanted to do instead, already anticipating her rebellious streak. Her eyes glinted with a mischievous spark as she suggested, almost dared, that we hike the closed trail anyway. As I said, I was a bit of a rebel in those days, and Maria was even more so. So when she proposed the idea of ignoring the closure, a thrill shot through me. We'd come all this way, and now some arbitrary rule was going to stop us? No chance. She gave me that look, The one that communicated an entire conversation without a single word, and that was all it took. We scanned the area, ensuring no one was watching, then slipped past the flimsy barriers. We started up the trail, our laughter echoing through the dense foliage, a couple of giddy idiots reveling in our minor act of defiance. At first, it was everything we wanted, even better than we'd imagined. It felt like we had the entire rainforest to ourselves, a truly exclusive experience. Imagine visiting a world-famous natural wonder, and you're the only one there. That kind of solitude, that sense of unspoiled intimacy with nature, is almost impossible to come by. We hiked for a good while, passing miniature waterfalls that cascaded over moss-covered rocks, admiring the vibrant tapestry of the rainforest, the towering ferns, the emerald canopy, the exotic blossoms bursting with color. And yes, we were also drinking, not excessively but just enough to feel a pleasant buzz, a warm hum beneath the surface of our skin. The rum had begun to loosen my inhibitions, making the air feel lighter, the greens of the jungle more vivid, the sounds of the forest more enchanting. It was truly fun, a carefree adventure, exactly what spring break was supposed to be. Then out of nowhere Maria screamed. It was a sharp, piercing sound, a raw cry of pure terror that cut through the tranquil hum of the rainforest. She recoiled violently, stumbling backward and almost knocking me over. The abruptness of her shriek instantly put me on high alert, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I didn't know what had scared her, but her reaction alone was enough to send a chill down my spine. My gaze darted frantically around, searching for a snake, a wild animal, anything that could have provoked such a primal fear. And then I saw it. A little further down the path, partially obscured by a fallen palm frond, lay something that made my stomach churn. It was what looked like a freshly decapitated mongoose. I had to do a double take, my mind struggling to process the image. Let me repeat that, it was a mongoose, and a surprisingly large one at that. Its head was completely missing, the neck a jagged crimson mess. I told Maria, her face pale and contorted with horror, to stay put. I approached the carcass cautiously, my heart pounding against my ribs, hoping against hope that it was some kind of macabre prank, a discarded stuffed animal, anything but what it appeared to be. It wasn't. I inspected it without getting too close, the stench of fresh blood already beginning to assert itself in the humid air. What I saw confirmed my initial, sickening thought. Its head was cleanly sliced off. The cut was too precise, too clean for it to have been anything other than a knife wound. It was a surgical dissection, almost. That fact was downright disturbing, adding a layer of calculated malice to the already gruesome discovery. But the worst part, the detail that truly sent a shiver of dread down my spine, was the lack of decay. The body hadn't started smelling yet, meaning it probably hadn't been there for very long. Perhaps only minutes. The implications of that were terrifying. Maria was visibly shaking, a tremor running through her entire body. I, on the other hand, was mostly in shock, my mind struggling to grasp the reality of what we were seeing. I tried to reassure her, my voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos in my head, by mumbling something dumb like, "Crime in a national forest? Unlikely." Even as I said it, I knew how hollow it sounded, how completely unable I was to explain this gruesome scene. I put my arm around her, feeling the cold clamminess of her skin, and gently ushered her past the body, trying to block it from her line of sight. All I could think about in that moment was putting some serious distance between us and that poor, lifeless creature. We walked in silence for a while, the vibrant sounds of the rainforest now muted by the thumping of my own pulse. And even though we put physical distance between ourselves and the mongoose, I could tell the moment was gone. The carefree joy, the adventurous spirit, it had all evaporated. The adrenaline rush had completely worn off my buzz, erasing my good mood, replacing it with a gnawing unease. As bad as I felt, though, I could tell that Maria was significantly more shaken. I couldn't imagine she was enjoying herself in the slightest. She whispered, her voice barely audible, that she still wanted to stick to our original plan of hiking the whole trail to the other side. But it was obvious, painfully obvious, that she didn't want to be in that forest anymore. And I couldn't blame her. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every snap of a twig, now sounded menacing, transformed by our macabre discovery. As we continued to walk, I couldn't help but rack my brain, trying to figure out what in the hell we had stumbled upon. It didn't make any sense. I wasn't aware of the hunting laws in Puerto Rico, but I couldn't imagine that hunting in a national forest, especially so close to a pedestrian trail, could be legal. And yet, that was the only explanation I could conjure. Why they had left that mongoose body there to rot, if it was indeed a hunter, was beyond me. It felt like an act of deliberate cruelty, or perhaps a warning. Was it a hunter who had seized upon the opportunity to have that part of the forest all to himself, just like we had? The thought was unsettling. I truly didn't know. Maria and I hiked another mile or so, me trying desperately to cheer her up the entire time. I pointed out colorful birds, tried to make jokes about our foolishness, anything to break the heavy silence that had fallen between us. But nothing worked. Her eyes were still wide with a lingering fear, her shoulders hunched. Eventually she admitted, her voice barely a whisper, that she wasn't feeling well and wanted to turn back. I didn't argue. Although I was definitely dreading having to walk past that spot again, mostly because I wasn't sure how it was going to affect her, and I just wanted her to feel comfortable, to feel safe. We retraced our steps, the path that had seemed so inviting earlier now feeling foreboding. The vibrant greens of the rainforest seemed to deepen into ominous shadows, and every rustle in the undergrowth sent a fresh jolt of anxiety through me. I could tell we were closing in on the spot where the mongoose had been. My stomach tightened, a familiar unease creeping back into my gut. I told Maria to keep her head down so she wouldn't see it again, and she nodded, her eyes fixed on the muddy trail beneath her feet. I braced myself as we turned the final bend, my eyes already scanning the ground ahead, preparing for the gruesome sight. But when the spot came into view, the mongoose was no longer there. My breath hitched. Someone had moved it. My heartbeat started racing, a frantic drum against my ribs, and I instantly began scanning the nearby trees, terrified that there was someone hiding among them watching us. The silence of the forest, once comforting, now felt oppressive as if it held its breath. I was not prepared for what came next. Instead of seeing a person, my gaze snagged on something hanging from one of the trees. It was a mongoose strung up with twine, its paws tied together. It rotated slowly in the gentle breeze, a grotesque pendulum. But that wasn't the worst of it. There was a sickly green liquid dripping from its body, a viscous, luminous fluid that hadn't been there before. It was a horrifying, almost surreal sight, utterly alien and deeply wrong. I couldn't help but curse out loud when I saw it, a raw expletive torn from my throat. My outburst caused Maria to snap her head up, her eyes wide with unbidden curiosity. And as soon as she saw it, truly registered the horrifying spectacle, she let out an awful, blood-curdling scream of pure terror. It was a sound that would haunt my dreams for years, a primal shriek of utter dread. Before she could freeze up, before the shock could paralyze her, I grabbed her wrist, my grip firm and urgent, and told her to run. We took off sprinting down the trail, a desperate, clumsy dash, trying not to trip over each other in our panicked haste. I let her go in front of me, partially to shield her, partially because my own legs felt like lead. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting someone to be following us, to emerge from the dense foliage, a silent, menacing presence. Instead, a deafening scream rang out from somewhere behind us. It was a woman's scream, not Maria's, but equally terrifying, perhaps even more so because it was unfamiliar, unexpected. It sounded like the kind of scream someone getting attacked would make, a raw, desperate cry for help that echoed through the otherwise silent rainforest. I felt Maria's body jolt mid-stride, a violent shudder that threatened to bring her down, and for a second I thought she was going to collapse. She let out this panicked sob, a broken sound of pure despair, and tried to push herself even harder, but she was already out of breath, her lungs burning. I kept my grip on her wrist, practically dragging her along as her pace faltered, her legs heavy and unresponsive. We couldn't stop, not now. My own chest was burning, my lungs screaming for air, but we needed to keep moving, needed to put as much distance as possible between us and whatever horror lay behind us. Eventually, Maria could barely run anymore, her movements slowing to a painful crawl. We had no choice but to slow down to a fast walk, each step a desperate effort. I turned around completely, starting to walk backward, my eyes locked on the winding trail behind us. Every shadow seemed to coalesce into a sinister shape, every distant rustle of leaves sounded like approaching footsteps. I was bracing myself for a fight, for a confrontation with whatever monstrous entity had strung up that mongoose, whatever had caused that agonizing scream. I was 100% sure that any second, I would see something charging towards us, a hulking silhouette emerging from the emerald depths of the rainforest. But nothing ever happened. The trailhead finally came into view, a welcome sight, and for a brief second, I thought we were in the clear, that we had escaped the nightmare. But then I saw someone standing near the barricades watching us. It was a park worker, his arms crossed, his posture radiating annoyance. He was clearly pissed off. As soon as we slipped past the barricades, he started yelling at us, his voice cutting through the humid air. He lectured us about breaking the rules, about trespassing, and told us he was kicking us out and banning us for life. But then he got a good look at Maria, who at that point was both sobbing uncontrollably and physically exhausted, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Her terror was palpable, impossible to ignore. Something in her raw vulnerability must have resonated with him, because his angry tirade slowly deflated into a look of genuine concern. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice, and told the guy everything. I didn't leave out a single detail: the closed trail, the mongoose, the gruesome hanging, Maria's scream, the woman's scream in the distance, the sheer, unadulterated terror that had gripped us. He listened intently, his expression shifting from anger to a grim seriousness. He told us we both needed to come with him, his voice now calm and authoritative. So we did. We were taken to a small ranger station near the parking lot, a utilitarian building bathed in the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, where a supervisor was waiting. The air inside felt thick with unspoken questions, with a lingering scent of stale coffee and disinfectant. I had to go through the story again, recounting the horrifying details, my voice a little steadier this time, but the images still vivid in my mind. Then again, when they called the police, I found myself repeating the entire narrative, each repetition making the events feel more surreal, more like a bad dream. Maria didn't say a word through any of it, her silence a testament to the profound shock she was still experiencing. She just sat there, clutching her knees, her eyes wide and distant. Eventually, her mother arrived, her face etched with worry, and we left. Still shaking, still haunted. I never heard anything about what the authorities found, or if they even bothered investigating beyond the initial reports. I'm sure Maria's family might have heard something given their connections on the island, but we broke up the following summer, our shared trauma slowly eroding the bonds that had once felt so strong. We fell out of contact after that, drifting apart as college life pulled us in different directions. So I truly wouldn't know. I haven't thought about this experience in a long time. But recounting it now, revisiting those horrifying moments, it's still just as unsettling as it was all those years ago. The details are as crisp and chilling as if it happened yesterday. I think the worst part about the whole thing, the memory that truly lingers and continues to disturb me, was that scream. Because we never saw anyone else on that trail, not a single soul beyond ourselves and the park worker. And I have no idea who it belonged to, or what horrific fate had befallen them. The mystery of it, the lingering unanswered questions, is what truly gnaws at me. The possibility that someone else, another human being, was experiencing something truly awful just out of our sight while we were running for our lives. That's the part that truly keeps me up at night even now. The scream. Who was it? What happened? The unanswered questions continue to haunt me, a silent, chilling echo from a spring break that went terribly wrong. I consider myself a pretty laid-back guy. Most of my friends are the same. We prefer quiet evenings, good company, and uncomplicated adventures. This happened last year, and the memory is still vivid, almost too vivid. Spring break was supposed to be exactly that, uncomplicated. Just me and my friends, Jackson, Ariel, and Isabel, camping on a secluded beach in Alabama. The plan was simple. No crowds, just stars and waves, the rhythmic hush of the ocean. We got there late, much later than we'd planned, the sun already dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues. We parked in the closest lot, the gravel crunching under our tires, and began walking toward the beach, our bags slung over our shoulders, the anticipation of a peaceful night growing with every step. The place was dead quiet. Eerily so. No other campers, no fishermen, nothing but empty sand stretching for miles in every direction, fading into the deepening twilight. According to Isabel, who was familiar with the area, locals sometimes used that part of the beach for overnight fishing, but tonight, it was completely deserted. Not fully dark yet, but the last vestiges of twilight were rapidly fading, so we knew we'd need to set up camp quickly, before the encroaching darkness made everything more difficult. Jackson and I immediately began pitching the tents, the canvas flapping in the gentle sea breeze. Since I had driven, I'd brought my dog Bean with me. He's a Doberman, a magnificent creature with a sleek, muscular build and an intelligent gaze. He absolutely adored the sand, and we all got a kick out of watching him run and roll around, kicking up plumes of fine white powder, his tail wagging furiously. He was a force of pure, unadulterated joy, a brief respite from the growing quiet of the beach. At one point, Ariel pointed out a car in the distance, her voice a little hushed. "It's driven by twice already," she said, her brow furrowed. I turned, and indeed, an old, beat-up-looking SUV slowly rolled past on the narrow access road that ran parallel to the dunes. The access road was little more than a strip of packed sand, just wide enough for one car. On one side was the beach where we were, the vast expanse of sand and sea, and on the other side, a dense line of thorny shrubs, completely obscuring the main roads from where we were. The car drove by, its engine a low rumble, and ultimately disappeared down the road, swallowed by the twilight. The four of us shrugged it off, exchanging dismissive glances. Probably just some local, we reasoned, checking on fishing lines or taking a late drive. We went back to setting up camp, the momentary flicker of unease already forgotten. By the time we finished, the last sliver of sun had vanished, plunging the beach into a soft, hazy darkness, punctuated only by the faint glow of our headlamps. We decided to crack open a few beers and settle into a circle, the conversation flowing easily between us. The girls, ever the health-conscious ones, opted for seltzers instead of beer, which of course we made fun of them for. It was almost fully dark at that point, the stars beginning to prick the inky sky, when I can't remember who noticed it first, but that car, the beat-up SUV that had driven by earlier, was back again. Only this time it stopped. It pulled to a halt directly parallel to us, its engine idling, casting long eerie shadows across the sand. The driver's door creaked open and a man got out. I could tell it was a man because of his sheer height, a looming silhouette against the fading light. But I couldn't make out any features of his face, which was swallowed by the shadows. He began walking towards us, his gait slow and deliberate, and the girls, sensing the shift in atmosphere, instinctively recoiled, a nervous flutter in the air around them. Jackson and I exchanged a quick glance, a silent agreement passing between us. We told them not to worry, a hollow reassurance even to our own ears, and got up to go intercept the man before he could reach our campsite, before he could invade our small circle of perceived safety. Bean, ever vigilant, was already on high alert, a low growl rumbling in his chest, his ears perked, his powerful body tense. I told him to come with us, and he trotted obediently at my side, a silent, formidable presence. As we got closer, I started to notice that the man was walking oddly. There was a slight limp in his stride, a hesitant shuffle, and he almost stumbled a few times, as if he were disoriented or impaired. When we got close enough, Jackson, ever the diplomat, said, "How's it going, man?" trying to keep things light to defuse the palpable tension. The guy didn't waste any time with pleasantries. He immediately slurred, "You're on my property." His words were thick, his voice gravelly, and a faint odor of stale alcohol wafted off him. I figured he was a little drunk, maybe just confused or territorial. I told him we thought the beach was public land, trying to sound reasonable. Keep in mind, it was really unlikely that some random dude owned this stretch of public beach. There were no private property signs, no fences, nothing to indicate private ownership. After I said that, the guy didn't answer. Instead, with a slow, deliberate movement, he pulled out a knife. The blade glinted menacingly in the dim light. Bean, sensing the shift from mere aggression to outright threat, immediately reacted. He started growling, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through the sand, his hackles rising, his body coiling, ready to strike. Honestly, the sheer ferocity of a Doberman at full alert should have scared the guy off, should have sent him retreating back to his car. But he didn't budge. Instead, his eyes fixed on us, he started running towards us, his knife outstretched, a chilling glint of malice in his eyes. Bean, with an instinctual bravery that still amazes me, didn't hesitate. He charged at the man, a blur of dark fur and raw power. He leapt, aiming for the arm that held the knife, a precise, calculated attack that caught the man completely off guard. The impact sent the man sprawling to the ground, the sand cushioning his fall with a soft thud. I yelled, "No!" at the top of my lungs, my voice hoarse with fear. I didn't want my dog to get stabbed, didn't want him to be harmed in our defense. But Bean, with incredible agility and foresight, somehow managed to get the dude to drop the knife, sending it skittering across the sand, a silver flash in the fading light. The man screamed in pain as Bean's powerful jaws closed around his arm, a yelp of agony torn from his throat. I whispered, "Get off him, Bean, get off," my voice barely audible above the man's pained grunts. And to my relief and astonishment, Bean listened. He released his grip, his eyes still fixed on the writhing figure on the ground, but he ran back to my side, a silent sentinel. The man, clutching his bleeding arm, eventually scrambled to his feet, his face contorted with pain and rage, and started running back towards his car, a pathetic, stumbling retreat. Jackson and I wasted no time. We turned and ran back to the girls, shouting, "He had a knife! He had a knife!" as we approached. By the time we finished recounting the horrifying details, the SUV had already driven off, its tail lights vanishing into the darkness. The girls, their faces pale with shock, immediately wanted to pack up everything and carry it back to the car. But there was a part of me that was nervous about that plan. That guy was unhinged, clearly drunk or worse, and there was no telling what he'd do. I wasn't keen on walking in the pitch-black darkness, our hands full with camping gear, completely exposed. Isabel, however, made a good point. Her voice, though shaky, held a chilling logic. What if he comes back with a gun or something? The thought sent a fresh wave of dread through me. We were vulnerable here, isolated. I told Ariel to call the police, to tell them exactly where we were and what had just happened. My voice was tight with urgency. Once the police were close by, once we had a clear signal, the four of us would start walking towards the parking lot with our stuff. Bean, sensing the lingering danger, was still on high alert, a low growl rumbling in his chest whenever a distant sound reached us. And I have to admit, the only reason I felt even remotely safe, even slightly less terrified, was because of him. He was our protector, our furry guardian. I noticed lights up ahead near my car, a beacon of hope in the darkness, and a wave of profound relief washed over me. The police had arrived. An officer stepped out of his patrol car, his silhouette illuminated by the flashing blue and red lights, ready to take our statements. I was not ready for what happened next. He quickly pointed to my car's tires, his voice calm but firm. "Your tires are slashed." I was horrified. I walked over, and indeed all four of my tires were cleanly, deliberately slashed. The realization sent a fresh wave of vulnerability crashing over me. This wasn't just a drunken lunatic. This was someone with a malicious, calculated intent. The officer, sensing my shock and despair, unholstered his weapon and told me to unlock the car, his eyes scanning the surrounding darkness. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking, and complied. He opened my trunk, the metallic click echoing in the night. But thank God it was a false alarm. There was nothing inside but our bags. The officer, surprisingly kind and understanding even with the late hour and the bizarre circumstances, was nice enough to help me with my tire situation, making calls, arranging for a tow truck. Thank God we brought Bean with us that night. That guy, that unhinged knife-wielding figure, was probably a drunken lunatic, yes, but he was also something more. He was dangerous. It could have easily been a quadruple murder if he had gotten his way, if Bean hadn't intervened, if the police hadn't arrived. Finding a nice, secluded place to hang out, to escape the crowds, is definitely an awesome time. But it obviously comes with its risks. Risks that sometimes manifest in terrifying, life-altering ways. That night, the illusion of peaceful solitude shattered, replaced by the chilling reality of human depravity. The quiet beach, once a haven, had become a hunting ground. It was spring break 2023. My friend Michelle and I, both 22 and fresh out of the soul-crushing drudgery of junior year, had booked a trip to Miami for a long weekend. It was both of our first times in the city, and the anticipation was electric. We'd found a full house rental in Wynwood, a vibrant, artsy neighborhood that was about a 20-minute Uber ride from the sprawling expanse of Miami Beach. We arrived late on Thursday, the Miami air thick with humidity and the distant throb of music. That first night, we just went out to some nearby bars, soaking in the local flavor, the energy of the city. It was fun, a perfect introduction to the vibrant nightlife. The following day, Friday, we Ubered to Miami Beach, eager for a quintessential beach day. We brought towels from the rental, found a spot on the impossibly white sand, and just laid there for hours, the sun warm on our skin, the sound of the waves a soothing balm. Multiple groups of guys approached us, as was to be expected during spring break, and we politely, or sometimes not so politely, rejected them. But there was one guy who approached us, seemingly specifically me, who was different. He had this really charming accent, a smooth, melodic cadence that immediately drew me in. His personality was outwardly nice, forward without being aggressive, and honestly, everything about him was handsome, from his perfectly disheveled hair to his athletic physique. He introduced himself as Will. He asked what our plans for the night were, his eyes sparkling with a playful curiosity, and then, with a casual confidence, asked for my number. And honestly, without a moment's hesitation, I gave it to him. He was off on his way down the beach, melting back into the crowds, leaving a faint scent of cologne in his wake. He didn't seem to be with anyone, which was a little unusual for the beach during spring break. We watched to see if he'd stop and try to get more numbers, but he didn't. He just kept walking away, occasionally glancing at his phone, and eventually walked off the beach in the direction of the street. Michelle, I could tell, was a little jealous that he'd shown me more attention, a subtle shift in her demeanor. Later that day, after the beach and a few more bars, we decided to leave Miami Beach. It was a little too crazy for us, definitely because it was spring break, but the sheer volume of people, the pulsating energy, it was just a bit much. We returned to the rental, stopping at a nearby store for drinks and snacks. our plan for the evening slowly coalescing. We drank in the backyard by the pool, the water shimmering invitingly under the twilight sky, listening to music on Michelle's speaker while we plotted our night. It was around this time I shot Will a text, a casual message asking what he was doing for the night. He responded almost immediately, his reply popping up on my screen with surprising speed. He and his friend he wrote didn't have plans yet, and then he suggested the four of us two, and them two, go out by us in Wynwood. Michelle jokingly asked if the friend was cute, a mischievous glint in her eyes, but I wasn't going to ask that directly. We made a plan for Will and his friend to come pregame with us at the rental around 8 p.m. They arrived promptly and the friend's name was Ken. And he was surprisingly good-looking as well, a handsome counterpart to Will. I could tell Michelle was pleasantly surprised, a faint flush coloring her cheeks. They brought their own drinks, leaving them on the counter in the kitchen, and we continued to drink in the yard for about an hour. They seemed very normal, engaging in easy conversation, laughing at our jokes. Everything seemed like it was going well, a perfectly normal, fun evening. Eventually we walked to a nearby bar, also in Wynwood, the city lights beginning to glow brightly around us. I have to admit Michelle and I were already quite drunk, our inhibitions considerably lowered, and Ken and Will kept buying rounds of shots, their generosity fueling the escalating tipsiness. Things became a blur pretty quickly. I wouldn't say I blacked out entirely, but bits and pieces of my memory became foggy at that point, like trying to remember a dream you've just woken from. Eventually, Michelle and Ken gravitated to another side of the bar, presumably to hook up, leaving me alone with Will for quite some time. The music pulsed, the crowd swelled, and the alcohol continued to cloud my judgment. Eventually, the call of nature became too strong to ignore. I had to go to the bathroom. But before I left, as I was pushing my way through the throng of people, I remember him calling out, his voice slightly slurred, "What do you want for your next drink?" I replied, "A tequila soda," and then I was off, navigating the crowded space to the ladies' room. When I came back out from the bathroom, pushing through the swinging door, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Will was like hovering over the corner of the bar, his back mostly to me, clearly doing something sketchy. His posture was hunched, his movements furtive. I walked a certain direction, angling myself to get a better view, a prickle of unease starting to blossom in my chest. And then I saw it. He had two drinks in front of him, presumably mine and his, but he was hovered over them, his body shielding them as if he were doing something to my drink. My heart started to pound. I may have been drunk, my mind a little hazy, but that was enough for my intuition, a powerful, primal instinct to tell me to leave. Immediately, I turned and walked away without him noticing, my movements as swift and silent as I could manage in my inebriated state. I headed to the other side of the bar, scanning the crowd frantically, searching for Michelle. But she and Ken were gone, swallowed by the swirling mass of bodies. Panic, cold and sharp, began to cut through the alcohol-induced haze. I rushed out of the bar, the cool night air hitting me like a shock, and tried calling her a bunch of times, my fingers fumbling with my phone. But she never picked up. Around this time, Will texted me a casual message, "Where did you go?" I ignored it, my blood running cold. I texted Michelle a bunch of times, a rapid-fire succession of desperate questions. "What happened? Where are you? Are you okay?" And then, taking a deep breath, I eventually dropped the bomb. "I think Will was trying to roofie me. We need to get away from these guys." My finger hovered over the send button, then I pressed it. I started walking back to the Airbnb, the familiar streets now feeling menacing, each shadow a potential threat. This was when Michelle finally texted back, her message a frustratingly naive question. "Why do you think he was roofing you?" I immediately replied, "Because he was hovering over the drink he ordered for me, doing something to it." My fingers flew across the keyboard, urgency propelling my words. She texted back, "Maybe he was just on his phone." The sheer disbelief in her tone was infuriating, and also deeply worrying. I tried calling her again, but again she didn't pick up. She texted back instead, "I'm still with Ken, just text." My heart sank. I responded to her, "I already left, so I'm not going back anyway," and I suggested she meet me at the Airbnb. She responded, "I'll be back soon," and that was the last I heard from her directly for a while. I continued my hurried walk back to the rental, every shadow stretching into something sinister. When I got back, I let myself in with the code lock, the familiar click of the keypad a small comfort. The door automatically locked after about 10 seconds, a security feature I now appreciated more than ever. Same thing with the back door. I sat down, really drunk and completely by myself, the silence of the empty house amplifying my growing worry for Michelle. But also, a part of me was wondering if I was just overthinking the whole roofie thing. Maybe he was just on his phone. Either way, it was too late now. I was surprised that Will never attempted to text or call me again, his silence a strange, unsettling absence. The next thing I remember, a sudden jolt, was the doorknob to the back door jiggling, a distinct, metallic sound. Then I heard the familiar button sound effects of the code lock, followed by a failed attempt sound effect, a high-pitched beep. My breath hitched. Then I got a text from Michelle, her message appearing on my screen, "Open the back door." My heart pounded. I went to the back door, my hand hovering over the lock, and called Michelle's name through the solid wood. There was no answer. Just the unsettling quiet. I tried calling her phone, but she didn't pick up. Another text arrived from her number, "Hurry, open the door, he's coming." And this was when I really started to freak out, a cold dread washing over me. "Michelle, you're scaring me." I yelled through the door, my voice cracking with fear. There was no peephole or windows to look through, no way to see if it was really her on the other side. I begged her, pleaded with her to please answer me, to give me some kind of verbal confirmation. She never did. I remembered there was a peephole in the front door, so I hurried to the front, my legs heavy with fear, and looked through it. And in that moment I actually felt sick, truly viscerally scared for my life. Because I saw what looked like Will, hiding to the side of the front door, his silhouette barely visible in the dim streetlights, watching the house. A million thoughts crossed my mind, a frantic, jumbled cascade of fear and doubt. If Michelle was running from Will, was she out there right now, in danger? Was he trying to trick me into opening the door? I was still too terrified to open the back door without her confirming it was her. I texted her back, "I'm calling 911 right now." She didn't respond. I actually did call 911, my voice shaky as I explained the situation, the fear making my words tumble out in a rush. While I was on the phone, my eyes still scanning the area, I checked the peephole again. Will was gone. When the police showed up, their flashing lights illuminating the quiet street, I let them in, my body still trembling. Within 5 minutes, one of them, a kind-faced officer, asked if my friend was blonde, and I said yes, my voice catching in my throat. He then told me that another officer had her in their squad car and was bringing her here. I was so incredibly relieved, a wave of pure gratitude washing over me, but also horrified by what she must have endured. When she arrived in a second police car, she had been visibly crying, her face streaked with tears and mascara, her eyes red-rimmed. She was very, very drunk, almost incoherent. To the best of her ability, she explained that she had had her phone stolen and she was lost, wandering the unfamiliar streets for an hour, terrified and disoriented, until someone finally helped her call the police. All of the texts I got from her number were never her. It was that guy, Ken or whatever his real name was. He had her phone. We also found her phone, to our shock, thrown into the pool in the backyard, a final act of spite. They clearly took off the second I mentioned the police, vanishing into the night like shadows. We had to make a police report, giving every last detail as specifically as possible, trying to recall every terrifying moment. They said they'd get the surveillance footage from the bar we went to. We also had to contact the Airbnb host and immediately cancel our stay, packing up our bags in the dead of night and finding somewhere else to go. It was a long, nightmarish night, a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of seemingly innocent encounters. Obviously, the rest of our trip was completely spoiled, tainted by the lingering fear and the unsettling reality of what had almost happened. It took a whole week before hearing back anything from the police, and the only reason they called was to confirm what the name that guy that I was texting gave me was, because it didn't align with the phone records for that number, which I'd already figured out myself. He was using another stolen phone. After that, I never heard from the police again, which is absolutely sickening how little priority the police put into cases like this, even with easy evidence. I have no interest in returning to Miami after this horrible experience. I could have honestly been killed. The thought still sends shivers down my spine.